You know, a lot of people tell me I look like David Beckham. Just less neck tats and more forehead. By now you've probably seen Beckham, David Beckham's biographical documentary thing that was made and released on Netflix. There are a lot of wild revelations in it, from Sir Alex Ferguson saying that the fame changed David Beckham, which obviously, to David Beckham insisting it didn't, which really? To the idea of David Beckham driving for hours on UK highways to try and get over the fact he got a red card in 1998, and I can only assume while he was driving in the rain while crying he was listening to like Mariah Carey or something. I don't know what was popular then, I was 2. But with so many details and revelations, there are some things that you might have missed, which is probably why you clicked on this video, because you knew that somewhere deep down in here somewhere. And I won't keep you waiting. The first thing that you didn't notice in the Beckham documentary, they used the wrong field. Now this one was picked up by The Mirror. When David Beckham was in a relationship with Victoria Beckham, which I guess is still the current state of affairs, but when they were in the genesis of their relationship, Victoria Beckham was remembering fondly how she used to want to go to matches at Old Trafford to support David Beckham. Except the footage over while she's talking is of Stamford Bridge. It's not of Old Trafford. Stamford Bridge is, of course, Chelsea's stadium, who David Beckham did not play for. Now, it's worth mentioning, if it sounds like I'm dumping on the documentary, that's obviously an easy mistake to make when you're making like a 5-hour show, and I enjoyed the documentary, but it has some flaws and should be taken with a grain of salt for reasons we'll touch on later. The second thing that you might have missed in the Beckham documentary is that he was actually held back after he was famously hit by the boot that was kicked by Sir Alex Ferguson. Now me, even as American that says soccer when I'm not talking to all of you guys on the internet, knows the story of Alex Ferguson kicking a boot and it hitting David Beckham in the face, and that being this symbol of a point where it all boiled over and David Beckham was too big for United and Sir Alex Ferguson didn't like him or couldn't handle him anymore. But what gets slipped in amongst all of these other discussions about what it meant going forward is that David Beckham actually got up to try to fight Sir Alex Ferguson after getting hit in the head with the boot. He says, "I got held back." And the only question I was asking myself after this is, what happens if he wasn't held back? Does David Beckham actually get into a fist fight with Sir Alex Ferguson? And in that case, who wins? I mean, YouTube boxing could make it there someday. I'm just saying, the next KSI fight, when he's boxing a rhinoceros, you look at the undercard and it's David Beckham against Sir Alex Ferguson. We can even give Sir Alex the first 3 rounds to try and even it up. Or right before the fight, we tell David Beckham that his closet is an absolute mess. That would probably even the playing field. The third thing that you might not have noticed in the Beckham documentary is in the same category. It slips underneath these large, winding narratives and incredible visuals of David Beckham in tight clothes. And that's the fact that his first kiss with Victoria was in a parking lot. Now granted, that's better than my average first kiss, which probably involves McDonald's in there at some point, but still, David Beckham and Posh Spice having their first kiss in a parking lot strikes me as unbelievably absurd. I guess it just goes to show that no matter how rich and famous you are, there's just something special about a parking lot where you're just getting followed around by paparazzi the whole time. It's one of the two. It's one of the two. The fourth thing that you did not notice watching the Beckham documentary, and it's in the same category we've been talking about, sliding underneath all these other narratives, and it's after they have their first kid. It really puts into perspective, one, just how much media scrutiny they were under during the course of all of this, and two, it makes David Beckham honestly look like a really good dad. And it's the moment where David Beckham himself slides in the fact that he used to sleep against the door of the room that his new child was sleeping in. Against the door, because he was so worried about the kidnapping threats that were swirling around him. And that's just messed up. That's the worst part of fame, and it happens even more with the internet now. You honestly just feel bad for him. You can't imagine the amount of stress. You're already dealing with becoming a father for the first time, and then he slips in, "Oh yeah, I used to sleep against the door." That's a whole other level. They're not just talking about, "Oh yeah, we were worried about the kidnapping threats." You're talking about, "Yeah, I got no sleep because I was sleeping against the door." Well, that one is sad. The fifth thing that you didn't notice watching the Beckham documentary might be my favorite one on the list. At the beginning of the final episode of the Beckham documentary, you're walking with David Beckham through his house, and it is freaking meticulous, to the point that the actual person that put the show together goes, "Do you do all this yourself?" To which David Beckham says, "Yes." Which, if you know anything about super famous people, like me, I do my own laundry. What's up? Name's Zealand. But seriously, if you know anything about uber famous people, it's very rare for them to do all of these things themselves. But he does. And you can tell, because his OCD DVD has like just this massive slip that if you really aren't paying attention, you completely miss. First, he shows off all of the clothes that he's going to wear for the next week, which in my brain is already insane because I've had laundry waiting to be put away for like 3 days. But then he opens his closet and he shows off all the various parts of his closet. It's organized by type and color. The drawers are laid out immaculately. It looks better than a Macy's. But then he looks up in this immaculate closet and starts tweaking the hangers by that much and says the funniest thing in the whole documentary. He goes, "Someone's been here." And then like he's embarrassed about the fact that somebody's been in there and it's not perfect. They quickly get to the next shot. All I'm saying is, David, if you're watching this, the closet looks plenty good. Nobody cared that somebody had apparently been in there. Although the fact that you can tell that means the CIA should probably hire you to diagnose when somebody's been in a room. But now we get to the next section with the sixth thing that you probably didn't notice in the Beckham documentary, and it's something that you would have had to really lock in on his baby pictures for, or his childhood pictures for, because David Beckham has 2 sisters. Yeah, he has an older sister and a younger sister, neither of whom are mentioned or obviously interviewed throughout the course of the entire documentary. Now, this might have been a conscious decision on their part. They might not want their face out there that publicly and to be wrapped up in all of his fame, but it would have been interesting on the flip side to hear about him as a child, not from his parents, because the siblings always know more. And the fact that they weren't even mentioned just strikes me as odd. You just have to see them in the baby pictures in the early parts of the show. The 7th thing you might not have noticed in Beckham is the relationship between his parents. There was one time I recall the parents actually referencing each other when David Beckham's mom talks about the fact that David Beckham's dad was probably a little too hard on him when he was growing up. But outside of that, they appeared in no scenes together and were not interviewed together and didn't really talk about their relationship around David or anything, and there's a very good reason for that. You see, David Beckham's parents are divorced, which of course sucks. That's sad. But what makes it incredibly awkward is that Ted Beckham, David Beckham's dad, wrote in an autobiography that was released essentially right after they got divorced that David Beckham's fame was actually a contributing factor to them getting divorced in the first place. According to Screen Rant, the pair only talked to each other through lawyers for a while before their relationship was eventually patched up well enough, I'm assuming, to do a documentary like this. That is a part of David Beckham's story that is essentially entirely omitted from Beckham. The 8th thing that you missed in the Beckham documentary, how the AC Milan tour ended. Now, as with most sports documentaries, the timeline is a little vague in terms of how long David Beckham was actually in AC Milan when he left from Los Angeles to go on loan. The stated reason in the documentary, in an interview with Fabio Capello, the manager of England at the time, was that in order to get into the 2010 World Cup, David Beckham needed to play against the best competition in the world. So he does the loan to AC Milan, he plays well, and he almost decides to move back to Europe full time. But then the documentary quickly cuts away from it, and you're not able to pick up exactly what happened, other than the fact that LA said, "No, you're not leaving." And well, first of all, he spent 2 years playing in Milan, but the thing you might have missed is that there is no reference to the World Cup, and that's because David Beckham did not go. David Beckham tore his Achilles tendon, which is like completely left out of the documentary, and that kept him from being able to play at the 2010 World Cup. I find it weird that they use that as the motivation to go to AC Milan, but just kind of left you on a cliffhanger. So there's the solution. No more cliffhanger. The 9th thing that you didn't notice about the Beckham documentary, that Studio 99 is in the credits. Now, Studio 99 is one of the production companies behind the Beckham documentary, and it is co-owned, of course, by David Beckham. Somewhere in your heart of hearts, you probably knew David Beckham was intimately involved in the production of the documentary and not just its subject. This article by the New York Times goes into detail about how that affected the filming for director Fisher Stevens. It uses an example where Fisher Stevens, the director, is in the kitchen with David Beckham and he's watching him clean dishes. But as soon as he saw the camera, David Beckham stopped. So Fisher Stevens tried to film it, Beckham just stopped doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. But there was an idea that Beckham didn't have to let Stevens shoot anything he wasn't comfortable with. Now, of course, Fisher Stevens said he persisted. I was like, David, please, this is who you are. This is what you do. Stevens said in a recent interview, it was a lot of negotiation. Nothing was like, okay, let's go. It takes time. But it is always worth knowing when the subject is also involved in the production, and David Beckham was definitely involved in the production for this one and did have a say on what was filmed and talked about. To what extent, we'll probably never know. But that does bring us to the 10th thing that you might have missed in the Beckham documentary, and that's that there was a sneaky edit. Now, there's a Deadline article in the description that details a couple of other sneaky edits like this, but the one I found the most hilarious because it actually misled me because I didn't know was that in 2001, that World Cup qualifier against Greece, David Beckham is shown being fouled around the edge of the area before his famous free kick, and then he's shown scoring the free kick, of course, and that's awesome and amazing. But it turns out David Beckham wasn't the player that was fouled to lead to that free kick. They just edited it to make it look like that. I've seen that free kick 100 times, and I still fell for the edit. I didn't notice that that had been artificially put together. And in case you were wondering, it was Teddy Sheringham that was fouled to set up that famous free kick against Greece. He deserved the credit. Nah, I mean, I don't really care that much, but it is interesting. No matter how much Beckham was involved in the making of Beckham, I still really enjoyed the documentary. It was great to get a window into the mind of one of the greatest players of all time, and I hope that more players make documentaries like this, because then I can make more videos like this. We'll just have a great time. If you enjoyed this one, please do subscribe, and if you want to keep binge watching videos, be my guest. That video is us going to the Faroe Islands to check out that team that made it to a European group stage from there, to just see how they pulled it off. It was cold, and also very fun and cool. That's probably the best video we've ever made, so check it out.